This right here is Magnus Carlsen's favorite opening, and in the next couple of minutes, you'll learn how to play the opening like the world champion. The Ruy Lopez is also played by Bobby Fischer and Garry Kasparov, so if you want to improve at chess faster than everybody else, this will help you tremendously. You're about to learn how the strongest world champions play the opening. Most Ruy Lopez guides are really stale videos that show you a dozen different variations to memorize, but don't worry, instead of memorizing 100 boring and confusing moves, we'll go through the individual missions of your pieces. That will make it much easier. Also, I will show you how to play the middle game after the opening, because what's the point of achieving a certain position if you don't even know how to play the middle game after that? Your first move is e4. I think the mission of your pawn is quite obvious, conquering the center squares and opening the diagonals for the queen and the bishop. Black usually responds with e5 to take back some of the center space and to stop you from playing d4, which would take over the entire center. The Ruy Lopez opening mainly revolves around conquering the center, but why? Look at this knight. It's attacking only 3 squares, and the value of these squares isn't really high. What's the point of defending this pawn? Nobody's gonna take it away. If the knight was positioned more to the center of the board, it would attack 8 squares at the same time. If the knight was positioned in the center of the board, it would be even more dangerous, attacking the enemy's second rank. Combined with other pieces, this could become a dangerous threat. Obviously, this knight can easily be pushed back. That's why both sides are trying to conquer the center. Once you conquer the center for yourself, you can place your pieces in those good positions, and you can stop your opponent from doing so. We play knight f3, attacking the center spawn. After that, the knight just waits, and black plays knight c6, defending the center pawn. Now, this bishop attacks the knight. Let me explain the mission of the bishop. Remember that the knight is defending the e-pawn. Let's say they play some move like this. You can take the knight, removing the defense of the e-pawn. Now you can take the pawn. But here's the problem. They just bring out the queen. There's no way to save both your knight and your pawn. You'll have to retreat your knight and your pawn is gone. So, let's go back. You can only take the knight and then take the pawn if the queen can't recapture your pawn after that. Later in the game, you might have a position like this. Now your pawn is protected, so you can safely execute your bishop's mission by taking the knight and then taking the pawn. So, in a normal game, your bishop just sits here and waits. Once this pawn is in safety, you can execute the mission. Obviously, if your bishop is attacked, you'll have to retreat it, maybe even twice. I don't think I need to explain why losing a piece is bad. Your rook's mission is extremely simple. Let's talk about that. By the way, real quick, you just saved yourself hours of memorizing moves. There are plenty of variations that differentiate by whether or not you should trade the bishop for the knight. The simple explanation with the safe pawn replaces all that, and the rook's mission is even simpler in my opinion. Make sure you subscribe right now. I will make it as easy as possible for you to improve at chess. Your rook's mission is to go to e1. I mean, you can also study all these variations, or you could just go to e1. It's a lot easier to play, and it's also the more aggressive option. These are mainly used to draw the game. There's just one problem. Let me show you. You want your rook on e1 to defend your pawn because your bishop is waiting for the pawn to be safe. But what if they instantly attack your pawn? If you castle now, they might take your pawn. Here's the extremely complex solution. Play rook e1 anyway. Do you see what's going to happen here? Your original plan to defend the e-pawn may have failed, but it failed successfully. Always go to e1. If they took your pawn, the knight now has to retreat, and your rook stares at the enemy king with a double-attacked pawn in between. The king is reconsidering the life decisions that led to this moment. If you take the pawn, the situation is even more dangerous, with a potential discovered check. If you know how to handle this, you can basically win the game on the spot. If you think, it's just go here with the knight, then boom, check and you take the queen. It's not that easy because you have to assume your opponent is in possession of a brain and will defend your threat. But I consider this scenario more a part of the middle game, so we'll go through an example game later that explains how to win this position. First, we should finish the opening moves. We have covered the knight, the bishop, and this rook to e1 thing. Now we'll talk about these 2 pawns, and after that, we can learn how to play the middle game. The 2 pawns, surprise surprise, want to conquer the center. It's impossible to predict how the board will look when you push unless you want to study an unbearable amount of variations. To make it simple, I'll leave out the black moves and just show you the basic idea. You push c3 with the idea of later pushing d4. If they don't take it, just leave your pawn there. If they do take it, you take back and achieve center superiority. There's an important thing missing right now, but I will show you what that is in the second example game. It's much easier that way. For now, all you have to understand is this attack idea. Let's talk about the middle game plan. We talked about the knight, the bishop, the rook, and the pawn so far. If you don't remember what these pieces do, consider rewatching because that's that's quite important. Now you'll learn how to play the middle game. Let's say the opening went something like this. Now you're in the middle game. Keep in mind that the specific moves don't really matter right now. All you have to understand is the basic game plan. Your plan for the middle game is a king-side attack. So you want your pieces on the king side of the board and the enemy pieces on the queen side. This knight, for example, can hop all the way over the board to g3. It looks silly, but you can center control and space advantage, allowing you to build up a big attack, and your opponent simply doesn't have enough space to build a proper defense. You'll often see a queenside counterattack. They try to push the pawns, which is okay. It's actually kind of good for you. If they don't do that, you can even start messing around with the pawns supported by your rook, hoping that your opponent will move pieces to the queen side to defend. If they move pieces to the queen side, it will weaken their king side. That's just an option in case they don't initiate the queenside attack first. This bishop, weirdly, already is in a good position. Just leave it there until you find a good attack move. You'll see that in the second example game. So, the quick summary is, all pieces attack king side. Pawn and rook mess around on the queen side to distract your opponent. Let's move on to the example games. They'll show you exactly how to execute the game plan. These are the standard Ruy Lopez opening moves. If you remember, the mission of the bishop is now waiting for the pawn to be safe, and the pawn will be once the rook is on e1. But black attacks with the knight. White castles anyway, sacrificing the pawn, and the rook goes to e1 anyway. Black retreats. This bishop is under attack, but the main thing in this position is the e-file. White takes e5 with a knight, and we end up with this dangerous situation. In this example game, white wins because of massive center control. The second game shows a bigger strategic approach with a kingside attack. Black takes, and instead of taking back with the rook, white brings out the knight. You'll see why. The black knight is pinned anyway. It can't move. Black takes the bishop. Now white finally takes on e5, and black has to block. This is why you should bring out the knight instead of taking right away. The knight can now go here, and the pinned bishop is double attacked. Excuse me, what is this center control? What opening do you know that just randomly allows you to attack like this? A rook and a knight on the 5th rank on move 9. That's ridiculous. So, black castles to unpin the bishop, and white takes it. Now white brings out another threat, the queen. This is a common trap in the Ruy Lopez, and there are plenty of those. The reason for that is the massive center control early in the game. Here, black brings the pawn to safety, and white sacrifices the queen. Double, triple exclamation mark. Brilliant move. The king has to take back, and the rook ends his career. This is the power of the Ruy Lopez. With solid center control and piece coordination, you can launch devastating attacks and crush your opponent. Make sure to practice these ideas and incorporate them into your games. Happy chess playing!